The breathtaking Cane River gives life to central Louisiana's fertile farmland. Along its banks, you will find the most prolific pecan orchards in all of Louisiana. It's on these banks that our family started over 50 years ago.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third installment of Greater Iberia Chamber of Commerce Up Next virtual programming series. This edition is going to focus on our 2020 regular and special legislative sessions. My name is Wendell Barrett. I'm the chairman's legislative co-chair and your moderator this morning. We are very excited to have you join us. This is our virtual version of Eggs and Issues, and over the years, many of you have attended, and we want to welcome all of you, and also those of you who are first timers, not only to Eggs and Issues, but to this digital version. We will try to maintain the same format as our Eggs and Issues as much as possible. We want to remind everyone this is not a debate, but an opportunity to provide information to our chamber members and to the community at large. We'll cover as many pertinent topics as we can. So we'll go ahead and get started. At this time, our panel is our core legislators, Senator Fred Mills, Representative Blake Miguez, Representative Boboye, and Representative Marcus Bryant. We refer to this group as our core group because we have additional representation for smaller portions of the parish, Representative Mike Huval and Senator Brent Aller as well. As most of you are probably aware, the Greater Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Commerce sponsors a community leadership program now in its 22nd year. And from the current class, I'd like to introduce Kim Romero, Service Excellence Manager at Iberia Medical Center, to lead us in the opening prayer. Kim.
Kim, are you with us this morning? Let me check here. It's a new world, huh?
It is.
Well,
Janet, while we're waiting on that, Representative Miguez is trying to get in. I don't know if y'all can resend him
Avery's
to log in, please.
Yeah, Avery's working on that right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not seeing everybody. Okay, maybe Kim is having problems, and she had an absolutely beautiful prayer. She shared it with me yesterday. You know what? Why don't have it. Let me see. Let me see if I can find it real quick, because it's just beautiful. So from Kim Romero, the Service Excellence Manager at Iberia Medical Center and a participant in this year's Leadership Iberia Class 22. Her prayer: Lord God, may the spiritualness of all leaders converge to provide us with a strong sense of reverence for life and community in this challenging social and economic times. May we seek approach and work with each other in a spirit of love, kindness, and positiveness that surpasses any human barriers. We lift in prayer today all who are challenged with making decisions for others, for ourselves, our families, and our community. In God's name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, Kim, for providing that beautiful prayer. We want to remind everyone that the Chamber accepts applications for leadership throughout the year for the next coming year's class. We also want to take time to remind everyone that the census is out, and we want to encourage you to complete the census. It's very important for federal funding, and our legislators. It determines a lot of advantages for our state and for our community. The deadline has been moved up from the end of October to the end of September. And as of last week, Iberia Parish had only 58% response rate. So it's very important that we get more responses to the census, and we want to encourage you to remind your employees and your associates to complete the census. We've provided a link to the census, as well as information on today's panelists on the program that we have provided to you. And now for our sponsor, I'd like to invite JD Regard, who is the Chief Operating Nut Officer of King River Pecan Company. We'll call him to center screen for our sponsor spotlight. JD has sponsored this event for many years, and it's important. So although we don't have our eggs with us this morning, there's still costs of producing these events, and we're trying to cope as much as possible. So we're very appreciative. So JD, go ahead.
And Wendell, I understand that JD hasn't logged in yet. So we will just move along with the program, and we'll have an intermission when we find JD.
Okay, and we want to thank JD and their sponsorship. And also we want to encourage everyone to buy local as much as possible, and to buy King River Pecan products. Just a fantastic product if you haven't tried it yet. We will begin with our panel discussion, and I'd like to acknowledge our official timekeeper, our chamber chairman, Mr. Mark Beyonce. Let me advise you on our format. We will begin with some opening remarks for each of our panelists. You will have 4 minutes. And also at the end of the program, you will have an opportunity for closing comments. And in between there, we'll have questions for our panelists. So we'll begin with Representative Blake Miguez. Good morning, sir.
How you doing, Wendell? Good morning.
We're doing good.
I don't have the eggs in front of me. I also don't have the pecans. I'm so used to staring at those pecans. I'm so used to cracking jokes with Fred on the side of me. And I'm always thinking about, I wonder when I eat here, should I eat the eggs or the pecans, and what's the best for them? But I always end up eating those pecans than the eggs. So, but I'm so happy to be here this morning to visit with all of you. It's been a crazy year, everyone out there listening. We went into this session, started up thinking we were going to have a very thorough, slow process. We're going to get things figured out. We got a number of things that we wanted to accomplish. In December, I was elected to lead the Republican delegation. So we had a number of retreats outside of session, thinking about what can we do to improve the lives of people in Louisiana. Some of the things we came up with were TARP reform. We want to do better with our fiscal process. We wanted to do a number of other things that would make Louisiana's business community much stronger. Right as we were getting into the session, we found out about something called COVID-19, which the whole world has learned about. And it threw us in a tailspin. We had a pause during session. We were not sure if we were going to return to session. We ultimately returned to session in a very shortened 30-day regular session. So we had to take all of our bills and cut them down and focus on the things that we wanted to focus on for COVID response. And I'm proud to say that in that short amount of time, we accomplished a number of great things as a legislature, specifically in our Republican delegation. We said that we were going to make sure TARP reform and lowering auto insurance rates was a #1 priority. In years past, since the 90s, we tried to lower the jury trial threshold as a legislature and a number of other things without success. In our first year out, we were able to lower the jury trial threshold as well as address a number of other things in an omnibus bill that, look, I don't consider a complete done process. We were really trying to hit a home run in the legislature. And I feel like we're rounding second on our way to third. There's still a lot of work to be done so we can bring it home to make sure that those auto insurance rates are lowered. But we took a historic first step. We also did things to protect our small business community. We passed a limitation of liability for COVID-related lawsuits potentially that could follow COVID-19. We made sure that those companies that were making hand sanitizer and doing things to help our community wouldn't be getting returned for their gratuity a number of lawsuits. We also, when we looked at our fiscal process, how we made up HB1, our operating budget, and HB2, our capital outlay budget, we took a very fiscal responsible approach. We had a standstill budget. We figured out a way to use CARES Act and federal fund dollars to make sure that we didn't have any tremendous cuts this year, and we didn't increase our overall budget of state spending. We got a minute and 33 left. Look at that. We didn't increase our spending past what we wanted to do. Also, when we looked at our capital outlay budget, we got rid of a lot of non-infrastructure projects that were in the bill. In years past, we overspent that budget, and we always spent more than we had capacity for. And this is the first year I can say that we only spent what we had capacity for. We took some of that extra money that we had, we stuck it in a little piggy bank, and we're waiting to see what's going to turn out, knowing that we got to fight this COVID-19 pandemic all the way through. Now, look, we're able to do some other great things as well. There's so many things I could talk about. I wish Mark didn't have only a minute and a half left. I wish I could get 10, but I'll try to hit those real briefly. We did some work towards expanding rural broadband. As we know, the education system has been shaken just like every other sector in this economy and in this state. So the biggest challenge we had is trying to bring education and distance learning from the classroom into people's homes. And we found out that we don't have internet in the rural areas. So we've done some great steps towards expanding rural broadband, and we have to continue that work. We also looked at our gun rights. You know, I'm a big pro-Second Amendment guy. I'm a competitive shooter. I love our Constitution. And we were able to look at some things and I got 22 seconds. We were able to do some things to expand gun rights during COVID-19. My last few comments, I want to say we got some great new representatives on the phone. We've got Representative Boboye, Representative Marcus Bryant, two great new members of our delegation. We're happy to have them. And I can tell you, I can see Senator Mills, he's our senior delegation member. I don't know if Mike Huval's on the phone, but I can tell you one thing about our delegation here in Iberia. We work together. We work for the people of Iberia. They're in our heart. And I just get excited looking at Fred's face, and I get excited working with this group because I can tell you they want to make our parish better. They want to make our state better. Yes, we disagree on issues, but we never disagree, and we're always in lock and step when it comes to supporting and promoting Iberia Parish.
Thank you
this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Miguez, and now Representative Marcus Bryant.
Representative Bryant, it looks like you're either on mute or perhaps using the wrong microphone. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I can speak for Marcus. I'm Marcus Bryant. I'm a new representative, great looking guy. Is that a good start, Marcus? No,
it seems as though you're still on mute, Marcus. No, not yet. Perhaps try your device settings. If you're on a phone or a tablet, I would suggest rejoining the call and using internet audio.
Oh, any great things you could say about Marcus while he's trying to figure out the unmute button?
I was going to talk about how much he likes low taxes and
well, I'll tell you what, Marcus worked pretty hard on that frontline responder bill.
yeah.
Well, Janet, we'll move on.
Right.
Okay. Senator Mills.
Good morning, Wendell. Good morning, everybody. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the chamber and all of the people at Iberia Parish, the workers and everybody else. And Mark, we're going to bring you as a timekeeper to Baton Rouge. You can keep things going much better. But I want to thank all of you. And you know, when you think back a year ago, it was Representative Miguez, myself, Representative Landry, and Speaker Barra, and we welcome Representative Boboye and Representative Bryant. You're doing a really great job. And it's hard to believe what happened in a year. You know, what was it, Janet? In the early part of the year, we had the big chamber banquet, and we cut up and laughed and auctioned off items and thanked so many people. And then all of a sudden, everything hit. And I guess I just wanted to take a little stroll down memory lane. And Representative Miguez did a good job of talking about the high points. And for me, as the chairman of the Health and Welfare Committee, I would say when we all got together on March the 9th and the governor made his agenda speech to us, he announced that there was one COVID case on March the 9th. On March the 11th, we had a Health and Welfare Committee, and it was announced by Louisiana Department of Health that there were 5 COVID cases. And little did we know that we would halt the session, as Representative Miguez talked about, until a later period of time. I was on a phone call that Sunday night on the 15th, and I was on the phone call with President Cortez of the Senate, and we were on the phone with Ochsner and all of the hospitals in the New Orleans area. And their predictions were so dire that the legislature had but no choice to say, at least let's take a pause and a timeout for that. And as Representative Miguez talked about earlier, when we did get into session, it was a really, really compressed session. So probably 1,300 to 1,400 bills had been introduced, but legislators had to make a decision that there was no way all those bills could get a fair committee hearing. So many of the key issues remained on target, as Representative Miguez talked about. You know, tort reform, big debate in the Senate was the coastal lawsuit issue. That was a huge issue that was debated for many hours, many nights. But we had to make a decision as the committee that I chair with Health and Welfare. And what we decided is there were 18 senators that had filed health and welfare bills. And we decided to defer all our bills until a later time at another session, because in the Health and Welfare Committee, we have the most vulnerable population that comes to testify. We have nurses, physicians, all healthcare providers. They were calling me up saying, listen, there's bills concerning my practice. There's bills concerning healthcare. I cannot come to the Capitol. We're in a tsunami of work right now. And then Department of Health and all those people were so busy that we deferred all of our bills. There were 38 bills, and we didn't hear any of those bills once that we came back into session. And what we decided as a Senate, kind of informally, was unless a bill was either COVID related or a major topic, we weren't going to move forward with it. From that standpoint, I would tell you that there are also issues that are out there that we're working on a day-to-day basis. So for me, usually I have a lot of information to talk about from the Health and Welfare Committee. Probably the one bill that came out of Health and Welfare from the House side was expanding the opportunity for patients that would like medical marijuana, that any disease state you have, your physician can recommend medical marijuana for you. So it opened up physician opportunities and patient opportunities. And I see where the time has got about 15 seconds, and I don't want to overlap, but I do want to thank the Chamber, and I want to thank all of the businesses in the Iberia Parish for what you do. And I look forward to more discussions.
Thank you, Senator. Can we get Representative Marcus Bryan on? No. We can do sign language.
Not working.
Nope. Okay, let's go with Representative Boboye. Good morning, sir. You have 4 minutes.
Good morning, Wendell. Thank you all for being on the call this morning. Thank you, Chamber, for putting this on. You know, I have a bone to pick with the Chamber. Last fall, when we had our Chamber forum and debates while running for office, no one asked me the question how I was going to handle a global pandemic in my first term and a stock market crash and oil below $1. So it wasn't something that we were able to forecast. So I think next time we need to add that to the list of questions the Chamber asks. So what you're going to do in the midst of a global pandemic? But it's been a whirlwind of an experience for freshman legislators. There was 40-something of us that came in. But look, let me back up before I get to that, because I wanted to make a note. You mentioned Leadership Iberia at the beginning. For any of you who are on the call who have not been involved with Leadership Iberia, I strongly urge you to do that. I participated in that probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I grew up in Iberia Parish. I know a lot of folks here. I know a lot of the different businesses here, and I learned so much through that program. And I would encourage all of you to do similar if you haven't done that. You're going to be amazed at what you don't know. That's right beneath your fingertips. And also Leadership Louisiana is another great program. After you finish Leadership Iberia, I would strongly recommend that as well. Being a freshman legislature was kind of like the leadership class where we have 40-something folks from all over the state having to get to know each other, to know each other's districts. And for me, that was Leadership Iberia set some of the framework for me to be able to serve. And so I just want to kind of mention that and give a plug for Leadership Iberia. But the freshman legislature coming in, we had a lot of grandiose ideas on how we were going to solve the world's problems and all the state's problems. And then, Senator Mills and Representative Miguez mentioned we got hit with COVID, which in some degrees, I believe that it was more difficult on the veteran lawmakers than it was on the freshmen because we didn't know what to expect. We had never been there. Senator Mills, Representative Miguez, they were used to their normal routines and how they worked their committees, how the staff interacted, and we weren't. So if Marcus Bryant can ever figure out how to get mute off of his phone, he would be able to tell you as well. We just showed up to the Capitol each day and did the work that we thought we were supposed to do, not knowing the difference that there was a commotion going around us. But the one big thing that Senator Mills mentioned, I did have to delay a bunch of bills that I had anticipated on running, but stuck with a couple of key ones that I thought were important to the state of Louisiana in the midst of the global pandemic. And I think we can talk about some of those as we go. But the focus for me as we went on, and it still remains the focus, is how we are going to handle opportunities for businesses to recover during the pandemic. So all along we want to create an environment in Louisiana, not where businesses can just survive, but where they can thrive. And now with the state of oil and gas economy, with the state of COVID, it's making it more and more difficult for those businesses to do that. So I think a lot of our policies, a lot of our legislation, a lot of our discussions need to be resolved around the business community and what we can do to help get them back on their feet, to pull them up with their bootstrings. I know in the Ways and Means Committee, which Representative Bryant and I both sat on, we were able to go ahead and extend some of the tax incentives for businesses and for development. And we thought that it was very important to do so, especially in the midst of the pandemic that we have. We're already starting to work on future legislation, working with Representative Miguez and his leadership with the Republican Party, and even hearing what the other side of the aisle is doing as well. But we have a lot of focus that we need to do, and a lot of work ahead of us. So I look forward to the rest of this forum and enjoying our eggs. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Boboye. Can we get Marcus on?
Can you hear me now? I'm on my cell phone. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
Go ahead, Representative Bryant. You have 4 minutes.
Good morning, Marcus Bryant again. I don't want to say the same things that Bo talked about, being on Ways and Means and talking about the businesses and different things like that. Really, I had 3 committees: criminal justice, agriculture, which deals with our farmers, and House criminal justice. 2 of those committees didn't meet. Well, we met in criminal justice maybe once or twice, but the focus was COVID related issues. Agriculture actually canceled our meetings for the year. We had 1 meet and greet just to get to know each other, and then they canceled out due to COVID. So most of the things we were working on were COVID related. So as being a part of the Democratic caucus, we were fighting for working people. So we were dealing with one thing was a blessing, being home and being able to work with Bo on feeding all our frontline workers daily at the different hospitals, and also regenerating income for our small businesses in our area. I think we put back over $30,000 into our small restaurants and fed 100 meals a day for about 45 days. But on top of that, being in session, we were dealing with getting money to the frontline workers, also trying to pass some bills that help small working people. Jeremy Lacombe was actually able to pass a bill that helped our small rural water systems, where they wouldn't have to come out and have a local match and have that 20% match, which most small towns like Erath and Delcombe and Jeanerette and Parks and other areas may not have to pay to put up to get their rural water systems back intact, which is a big deal in our state. Our water systems are failing tremendously. Another thing was able to do was with dealing with our rainy day fund. We're able to put on a constitutional amendment through Representative Carter through appropriations to allow us to decide if we want to be able to use our rainy day fund in areas like this time where there's a federal national disaster in our area. Amy Freeman was able to get in through Ways and Means a bill that allowed mothers, young mothers, not to have to pay taxes, or the parishes to decide if they want their mothers to not have to pay taxes for necessities like diapers and all of that feminine products. Then we also did a bill that allowed inmates that were at home for a long period of time on parole after 3 years or 5 years not to have to go and report and pay money and report for decades at a time monthly while on parole. They could reduce and go inactive if the parole board found that to be necessary. That cut and saved the state maybe $3 million, I believe it was, because of the extensive costs that it cost us to have people in the field monitoring parolees, where we weren't actually, the money we was collecting was not even enough to make up for to meet the budget to actually pay those parolees. So probation and parole was happy about that bill, where it saved the state some money on that. I don't know how much time I have, but all we did was different. We were able at the end to start a study and put together a group to work and deal with policing in our state and try to change our policing laws and procedures to help protect our working class people and trying to deal with this issue we have in our criminal justice system when dealing with policing. So that's about it, in supporting and watching how to learn and following our senators and trying to understand how to protect our small rural areas. Bringing broadband and allowing companies to do broadband in rural areas was also a big deal, especially for this area, especially with COVID and having to be at home and not having broadband in certain areas of the community.
Okay, thank you, Representative Bryant. We appreciate that.
Yes.
We're going to begin our questions going back to Senator Mill on health care.
Right.
You will have 8 minutes to respond. We have a two-part question for you. In your 12 years as a legislator and as chair of the Health and Welfare Committee, how would you describe the differences in this past session as it relates to health and welfare of the state? And please include in your discussion what your thoughts on telemedicine. And due to the fact that so many people are staying home and are utilizing telemedicine at such a rapid pace, do you think these are the type of issues that will impact insurance premiums? Thank you. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you for the questions. I guess to get started from a Health and Welfare Committee perspective, I've been on the committee for 12 years, and I've had a privilege to chair it for the last 5 years. And it's a committee like no other. It's a committee where so much of the population shows up to testify that I don't care if it's whatever issue it is, the general public comes to those committee hearings. And in this case, I can tell you that I received calls throughout the state because there was some controversial issues coming up, especially concerning different practice standards in boards and commissions. And the calls that I received was mostly from nurses and frontline workers saying, please do not hold any committee hearings. I cannot attend the session, this coming session for committee hearings. So as I said earlier, we decided as a Senate that we withdrew all of our bills, and we'll file them in the next few years to come. And we may be filing some bills in October if there is a special session, especially concerning immunization and potentially testing. So we are looking at legislation for the upcoming session if there is one. I would tell you kind of just a quick example of what we experienced. Usually when bills are introduced, groups call up and say, listen, there's some issues here. Could you tell us what's the impact of that? And I want to thank on the Senate staff, Brandy Cannon and Christine Peck, who are our attorneys, and Yvette Gregg, who's my legislative assistant. And one of the calls that we got was, this is really interesting. There was a bill that was passed in the House. It was passed 100 to nothing. And I'm not talking about the bill itself, but what took place during the session. It was passed 100 to nothing. It was House Bill 610 by Representative Landry from New Orleans. And the bill had 40 co-authors from all walks of the state and all different party affiliations. And when the bill made it over to the Senate, immediately we contacted the Attorney General's office because the bill had some conflicts with some things that Attorney General Landry was working on. It was concerning forensic exams of minors, and it was a good concept, but the bill had some structural problems to it. So we contacted the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office came and testified, and immediately even the author of the bill realized that there was some work to be done and withdrew the bill. And I think the reason that the bill passed 100 to nothing in the House is that there was so much going on with the Attorney General's office, so much going on with the legislators, that the speed of the session, really some bills had to be talked about a lot more when it made it to the different sides of the chamber. So for us, it was like no other session I had ever seen. As I said, I had 21 bills. Most of them were healthcare related, and I'll defer them till another time. The issue, Wendell, you're talking about with telehealth, that's a really interesting issue. And I think we would all agree that in the event of a catastrophe gives you an opportunity sometimes to do things you wouldn't want to do. And in this case, I think many physicians, especially physicians that have been practicing medicine for a longer period of time, I don't think they were embracing telehealth and telemedicine as much as maybe they wanted to. And if we look at all of the industries, we have so many people, I think, on this call, with banking, that with just this COVID situation, more people are doing telebanking, more people are doing remote banking, more people are doing commerce online, more people are even dating online, gaming online, all types of things online. So physicians really turned on applications to do telehealth. And what this made it really good was that the insurance industry embraced it. So you didn't have that disconnect between the insurance industry and you had the healthcare provider getting paid for the services. I think some certain obstacles may be into it is what do you do? And I think these discussions are ongoing and they've been going on, is a physician that's practicing telehealth in another state, and that physician violates Louisiana law. So there'll be licensing issues, there'll be regulatory issues. But I will tell you from the calls I've received from the general public and from healthcare providers, I think this is going to become much more popular. It's much more efficient if you have minor type situations, minor type diseases. And to take kind of a side note, I'm not sure how much time we have left, but to take a side note with the telehealth issue, I think the next debate as far as where our committee is going to go and where things are going to happen is, because so many people, it's been said, are not getting the day-to-day primary care services, will this affect insurance premiums? I would say no, but I think the industry is predicting, and for the businesses, this is really important. There are predictions that there could be a 10% increase in healthcare costs, especially a group healthcare cost. Not sure if that's accurate. It's a prediction like anything else. But there is a pent-up demand right now for primary care services. And as we know, our hospitals during the COVID situation, especially in April and May, primary care services and elective surgeries basically were curtailed during that period of time. And if you talk to leadership at Iberia General and at Lourdes and Lafayette General in those areas, they will tell you that that had a tremendous, tremendous impact on their fiscal health of those hospitals. So like every business in Acadiana and every employer in Acadiana, it has been a challenge. So one of the things I'll be looking at in talking to Blue Cross and all the different insurance companies and the managed care organizations is, if there is some talk of insurance premium rate hikes, let's see some data and let's see some figures that make that that make that true and make that possible. So I guess if I had to recap from this past session, I would tell you it was a session that we, for the first time in my 12 years, usually I have so many bills to talk about from the healthcare piece that we either passed or we defeated, that we basically said we'll wait till another time. And the criteria that we used was this. We used the criteria that if it's not COVID related, if it's not time sensitive, and if you can wait till another time, let's work on that legislation at a later date. On a side note that is really interesting, many of the bills that were introduced, including some bills that I introduced, we can work administratively with those departments on it. Some of those pieces of legislation have rulemaking authority within those agencies, and those agencies to promulgate rules and regulations. So it doesn't cause a complete halt to it, but it's just another way of working it. So in conclusion, health and welfare is still on a day-to-day basis working on a lot of issues and so many constituent issues that I do want to thank everyone in our delegation, because so many healthcare issues we all work together on. And it's a privilege to work with all of you. And I do want to say one thing. I do want to thank the great folks in Iberia Parish for giving me an opportunity to serve for 4 more years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. And of course, your experience in a very important topic of healthcare is so vital. We appreciate all you've done over the years and will continue to do. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to gun laws, and Representative Miguez.
Excuse
You
me.
have 3 minutes to.
Wendell, excuse me. This is Janet, and JD is on. So if we can take our sponsor spotlight now, that would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me, Janet?
Absolutely.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm sorry running a little late. It's crazy Tuesday morning here, but it's a privilege to be a part of the Zoom call this morning. I'm glad that this technology is available for us to all stay connected in a very disconnected time. Cane River has been a part of this program for a few years now, and it's a real pleasure of ours to be a part of it. So I just wanted to thank everyone for participating, even as it's an unusual manner, but it looks like we're all getting used to this kind of stuff. And hopefully soon we can all get together and high five and hug and all that other stuff we've been missing out the last few months. But I just want to say thank you all for having us, and it's going to be pecan season soon, so don't forget about us if you can. So that's about it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, JD. And we appreciate your sponsorship. It's a big help for us. And, you know, even though we don't have our eggs, without eggs and issues, we still have some production costs, and we really appreciate you sponsoring the program. We'll move on to gun laws, which Representative Miguez will give you 3 minutes to respond to this question. You authored House Bill 140, now Act 299, prohibiting someone with a permit to carry a concealed weapon from entering a public or governmental building where a government authority holds its meetings. What did you feel was the need for this legislation, and how does the final version accomplish your intended purpose?
Thank you, Wendell. So House Bill 140 is a piece of legislation I've been working on for the last year or two. And the main focus of the bill was dealing with preemption of state law, how it relates to local law. The portion that you talked about, public meetings within a governmental body, was actually an amendment that was put on in the Senate. It wasn't part of the original bill, but it was just basically a clarification amendment of concealed carry code of all the restricted areas. Government meeting places were already restricted in the code. And with the negotiation with the Senate, they wanted more clarity in that section. So in my opinion, the law did not change there, because you never did have a right to bring a firearm if you're a law-abiding citizen with a concealed carry permit to a meeting place of a public body, because that was always prohibited under the code. The purpose of the legislation that I brought was to make sure that all gun laws, whether they are more restrictive or less restrictive, those conversations happen at the state level, and the state law preempts local law. So there was a caveat in the previous law that said that local authorities were still able to prohibit in excess of where the state wanted to prohibit firearms in certain commercial establishments and public buildings. We wanted to make sure that the code was very consistent. We wanted to make sure that if you're a law-abiding citizen like myself and many of the members on this phone call, and you have a concealed carry permit and you're carrying in the state of Louisiana, if you leave Iberia Parish and, for example, go into New Orleans, you'll know exactly what the laws are. And we don't criminalize a law-abiding citizen. There are some areas across the state that have really restrictive gun laws on a very local level on places that you normally can carry under state law. We wanted to make sure that this patchwork of laws, remember, we have around 365 municipalities across this state. We have 64 parishes. We wanted to make sure that a law-abiding citizen knows exactly what those gun laws are. And if we ever have to change the gun laws, make them more or less restrictive, those conversations will happen at the state level amongst all the representatives and the senators. This legislation is very similar to how the other states have passed their laws, and it dealt mainly with preemption. Real quick, I'd like to give a thank you to the legislature, both the House, the Senate, and the governor for working together to pass the first pro-gun package that we've seen in the last 5 years. Not only did we pass this bill, but we passed a bill that dealt with emergencies. And when you're evacuating from a mandatory emergency, if you're a law-abiding citizen, you can carry your firearms for 48 hours. We also passed gun legislation in regards to emergencies where if you have a situation like a pandemic, like we're going through now with COVID-19 or a hurricane, then there's no local government authority that can shut down an essential business like a gun store or an ammunition store. We saw in New Orleans where the mayor there had restricted the transfer of firearms. And in times like this, individuals need the ability to practice their Second Amendment rights to defend themselves and their loved ones. We also passed legislation dealing with carrying firearms in churches. And now you can, if you're a law-abiding citizen and you have a concealed carry permit, if the church is okay with carrying firearms in their church, because they always have private property rights, they can say yes or no. You can now carry a firearm in a church without any additional training or additional notifications or additional approvals outside of what's already outlined in the concealed carry code, which is sufficient. I hope that gives you an understanding of the gun laws. And again, thank you so much for the House, the Senate, and the governor for passing the first pro-gun package the state has seen in the last 5 years. And I was happy to work on that and on author and co-author the whole package. Thanks so much. I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Representative Miguez. Next is on education, and Representative Bryant, we'd like to ask you to comment on your House Bill 602, which became Act 154, on the FBI providing rap sheets to the Louisiana Department of Education. We'll give you 3 minutes. Tell us what did you feel was the need for this legislation, and how did the final version accomplish what you intended?
Okay, this bill was a department bill, and it was brought by the Department of Education and I believe the Department of Health. The bill was twofold. It definitely was the need for the bill as it relates to daycares, because it saves about $3 million for all businesses annually. The bill, the nuts and bolts of the bill is that when a healthcare worker, when a daycare worker goes in and applies to work at a daycare facility, any daycare facility, they have to take a federal background check requiring fingerprints. That's a $100 cost on the daycare per employee. 50% of that deals with just getting fingerprints. So at the end of 3 years, they have to reapply or recertify. They were having to pay that same $50 again for each employee. Now this bill allows for those fingerprints to just go into the system, the federal back rack system, and it removes that $50 administrative fee across the state for all daycare. What we didn't have on the second part of this bill is that teachers were never, after their initial background check, teachers never had to take background checks in our state. And we were an outliner in that. I think there were only maybe 3 or 4 other states that still had the same laws in place where the teachers were still under self-reporting mandates. So now the teachers are part of the back rack system, where a teacher, once their fingerprints, and Betsy has to create a start date for when their fingerprints will be sent to the federal government and put into their back rack system. The back rack system is not only a system that allows them to get a background check for all employees upon request, the federal back rack system mandates that person has an arrest. When a teacher has an arrest or any kind of conviction, immediately the school board is informed and put on notice of that arrest or that that arrest or conviction, which takes away the gap between when a teacher actually reported whether they were going to report or not report certain crimes to the school board. So the Department of Health and the Louisiana Department of Education thought that would be an important bill and was something that we needed to fix in our state in order to protect our kids and children, and knowing what kind of teachers and what kind of workers we had to have in our daycares on an ongoing basis versus on a self-reporting basis.
All right, thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to the industrial tax exemption. Representative Boboye, can you tell us where we stand on the industrial tax exemption? We'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure thing. Yeah, this will be a quick one. When Governor Edwards got in office, he changed the way that the Board of Commerce and Trade was able to approve industrial tax exemptions in the local municipality, in the local areas. It used to be it would go to the Board of Commerce and Trade. It would go through the process, the requirement would all be checked off on that end. And then when Governor Edwards got in office, he wanted to give the locals more of an input into that decision. So now if a business locates to Iberia Parish, or if they expand in Iberia Parish with in the manufacturing arena, they have to go before the school board, our parish council, and the sheriff to basically get approval for this industrial tax exemption. Now in Iberia, we have created kind of our own little system that kind of works for us. But statewide, they're taking everyone through the shed, if you want to say it that way, and having to go in front of the school board, parish council, and sheriff each time. And it's kind of intimidating, especially for a business who's looking to relocate into Louisiana, not knowing if you're going to get this exemption or not. And the politics in Louisiana has been rich in corruption over the years, as y'all all know. And so, politics comes into play. So let's say I didn't support our sheriff here in Iberia. We have a new sheriff. Let's say I was with his opponent, and I had a project that wanted to come to Iberia Parish or to expand my business. I now have a sheriff who can block my project. I didn't like the idea of our local municipalities picking winners and losers. So what we did is, for those parishes that want to be aggressive, I'm hoping Iberia Parish does as well, from an economic development standpoint, we still giving the locals a choice. So the school board, the parish council, and the sheriff get to all decide ahead of time, and before the calendar year begins, and they can choose to become ITEP ready. So they can say, hey, if these businesses meet all these different criteria set forth on the state level, any business can come to Iberia Parish and they'll give the exemption. And that way Iberia Parish can use that as a tool to attract other industries and businesses to expand into Iberia Parish, and they can broadcast that they're ITEP ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a question for two of our representatives, Representative Bryant and Representative Miguez. We'll give you 3 minutes. What is your agenda to help businesses reopen? And can you comment on the Main Street Recovery Grant Program for small businesses? Representative Bryant, if you would go, please. 3 minutes.
Well, opening up, we're kind of going to follow our governor's direction as it relates to going from phase to phase. The grant, the Main Street program is a really great program, especially for all of our small businesses, and believe 50 million of that was put on the side for minority business and businesses where the owners were in the military, and businesses owned by women, which is a great thing to protect our small, even smaller businesses and minority businesses and military families that have come home from the military and started small businesses. And those grants go up to about $15,000. And from what I understand, those monies are going out as soon as possible in the coming weeks, and all of the applications and that process is working smoothly through the Treasury. But as it relates to opening our state and opening the businesses, our governor has been great and actually been recognized nationally for how he's handling the pandemic and safety in our schools and our children first, and protecting our communities from a health perspective, and trying to figure out also how to survive from a budget-wise. So basically, it's really supporting our governor. He has he deals with the national government. He talks with the vice president weekly and understands holistically exactly what's going on and what will be the best approach from a safety standpoint in reopening our state, where we actually can reopen and not have to close and not have to deal with more fatalities, and making sure testing and the right protocols are in place. So basically, again, following our governor and listening and trying to understand what we need to do locally in our districts to help carry out his plan.
Thank you very much, Representative Miguez.
Thank you so much for the question. Marcus did a great job of talking about some of the funding side, and I'll start there. So in the CARES Act, there was $1.8 billion that's sitting in the state's account. $810 million of that was going to go to local government to reimburse them for COVID-related expenses. We realized that a lot of that money would not be used because of it couldn't offset revenue loss, it could only offset expenses due to COVID that a local had. We noticed in Mississippi they had set up a program, and in Louisiana we set up a program called the Main Street Recovery Program. We took $300 million, now $75 million, and put them in a program that was administered through the Treasury to help small businesses with COVID-related expenses. And some of those things were liberally construed, like your utility or your rental on property during COVID-19. So it was able to help some of the small businesses out there. Marcus and a member of the Democratic caucus worked with the Republicans to also come up with another program called the Frontline Workers. We took, I believe it was around $50 million of that $810 million and put it towards those workers in the front line, like grocers, those workers that pick up your garbage, police officers. I mean, look, it's important. At a time when the country was talking about defunding police departments, here in Louisiana, we had peaceful protests as well as Republicans and Democrats working together to say, look, we appreciate law enforcement. We're going to give you a frontline worker tax incentive to show our appreciation. Now, reopening Louisiana is a different subject. It's very near and dear to my heart because I'm a small business owner. I own multiple small businesses here in Iberia Parish. I realized in the legislature, and I tried to pass this along to our freshmen, including the freshmen in our own delegation, that the vote on the budget this year was a very easy vote compared to in the past. We didn't fight with the governor. We didn't fight with the Senate. We passed the budget because we had an exorbitant amount of federal funding that came down, that we couldn't expand our budget. We couldn't give teacher pay raises and do some of the things that we wanted to do, but yet we pretty much had a standstill budget. Next year, it may not be the same. And we're going to get into our REC forecast, and we're going to realize that the state budget coffers are likely short hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion. And that's where the tough decisions are going to start. And we ask ourselves, why will that likely be the case? It's because the private sector here in Louisiana is struggling because they're having to follow arbitrary rules from government telling them what their capacities could be or what they have to do in their business. Look, I personally support all the precautionary measures. If we're going to social distance, if we're going to sanitize, if we're going to take appointments on, we're going to start doing Zoom calls. If you want to wear a mask, all those things, they help. They definitely don't hurt the situation. They help stop the spread of COVID-19. But a year from now, 5 years from now, we got to remember that it's just as important. We're trying to protect lives. It's just as important to protect livelihoods. It's just as important to protect your small business that you sacrificed everything for. The only people that seem to be doing very well outside of certain small sectors are big box stores like Walmart, Amazon, and those places. And small business, which is the backbone of our state and the backbone of our national economy, they employ 45% of all the jobs across this nation. They're important too. You're important. You don't need government telling you how to run your business. You've been educated. You can follow the governor's guidelines. You can follow the president's guidelines. You can open back up and make revenues again. You shouldn't have government telling you what an arbitrary number is on what your capacities are or what businesses can stay open and which can't. In that regard, talking about bars versus restaurants versus casinos. We need to level the playing field. We don't need to pick winners and losers. It's important to get our state back opened up. And what have I done? I've been very aggressive on the issue. I've wrote several letters to the governor expressing how important it is to also protect the citizens' livelihoods. I've signed a petition that would take away the governor's emergency powers and give the legislature a seat at the table again to have these discussions and to be your voice at the Capitol and say, look, it's our state too, and we want to help you and work together to solve this pandemic. Most recently, I filed an amicus brief in the Western and the Eastern District supporting the bar owners. who have been unfairly shut down versus casinos which have bars or restaurants which have bars. I've been doing everything within my power. The frustrating part about all this is that our law gives a lot of power to the governor and emergency powers in the Title 29. And he's been using those emergency powers. And look, I think that he's doing the best job that he can to help address a pandemic that's a worldwide pandemic. But we in the legislature, we want to help too. We also represent the people of Louisiana. And it's just too much power to have in one person's hands. And there's an executive branch our Constitution sets up, a judicial branch, and us, the legislative branch. We're your voice at the Capitol. We understand that you sacrifice, and you're sacrificing everything right now to have that business. I'm afraid you're going to lose your business. I'm afraid you're going to lose your livelihood. And at the end of the day, I work for you, and I'm going to stand and fight for you. And I'll continue to fight to get your business back opened up. And I have my prayers for the state of Louisiana, our prayers for our national economy. I want us to be prosperous again, and I'm going to work every day to do that. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you, Representative Miguez. Next, we're going to move on to capital outlay. As you know, capital outlay is the state funding for local infrastructure and construction projects. You served on the Ways and Means Committee that oversees capital outlay. Iberia Parish did fairly well with a host of projects, and none were vetoed. Tell us what was different about this year with respect to capital outlay, how it was handled, and tell us about some of the projects and what they mean for the parish. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. This year, let me back up. In previous years, in capital outlay, what would end up happening is the Ways and Means Committee would make a lot of promises. And let's just use an example. Let's say we had a bond capacity of $500 million to divvy out for special infrastructure projects around the state. Well, they would go and they would allow $700-800 million in projects to be authorized. And then when it came down to actually the bond issuing the bonds for the projects, we only had $500 million in capacity. So what the governor in previous years was able to do is he was able to go project by project and take out those that he had political vendetta against. And it's not picking on John Bell. This is governance going back throughout Louisiana's history. That's one of the powers that the governor has with the line item veto when it comes to capital outlay. So by fully funding it and not overfunding it, we somewhat tied the governor. I don't want to say tied his hands because he could have still vetoed projects. But if he would have, we would have had a capital outlay bill that would have been underfunded. The other thing that we did is, for the most part, I would say the majority of the pet projects that you hear about, the golf courses, the splash pads, all those things from around the state that you scratch your head and you wonder how's the state funding that, all those will cut out of the project. If it wasn't a road, if it wasn't a bridge, if it wasn't infrastructure, if it wasn't an airport, if it wasn't a water port, for the most part, it was cut out of the capital outlay bill. We were able to do pretty well in the bill. If Senator Allen was here, he's chair of Rev and Fisk. He could explain it in detail. But I mean, we were able to continue the big dollars went to the Port of Iberia. Craig Romero there was at the Capitol as much as we were hustling for those capital outlay dollars. He did a good job. But I mean, in priority one in surplus dollars, if I'm not mistaken, we got over $13 million for the dredging of the Port of Iberia. And Representative Bryant worked on the North Taxi runway over at the airport, which was really big, that we're able to get some money into. We have the Acadiana Crime Lab that's been in deplorable shape that is getting a large chunk of dollars. We were able to also do some sewer improvements in the city and in the parish. A big one also working with Mayor Freddie DeCourt. We're able to get some frontage road projects funded that has some federal dollars tied to it. We're still working on that. There's some restaurants around Highway 14 and Highway 90 that are looking to come if we can get this frontage road. So we've made that a very top priority. But you've also had another big priority for the region, like I-49, that got an enormous amount of dollars. Also in the Youngsville and Broussard area, they had a Highway 89 project that the two cities got together on that was really big for them. You have the South Lafayette, because a lot of that's part of my district as well. And the South Lafayette Loop got a big chunk of funds as well. So overall, though, Iberia Parish in surplus and priority $1. We got over $20 million this year in those two buckets. Also, the Value Test Museum picked up a good chunk of change as well in it. But yeah, over 20 million in surplus and priority one. That's huge for Iberia Parish, and that's going to have a great impact on our economy.
Thank you very much. We're moving on to our final question, and each of you will have 5 minutes to respond to these questions. You know, the question for everyone is how to move forward from where we are and what we're experiencing. And two of the bigger questions are relate to state government. Tell us, what do you think the answer is to gain a viable, sustainable state budget? And what are your thoughts on the 7 constitutional amendments that are coming up on the November ballot? We want to remind everyone that the Chamber is planning to host another event focusing on those amendments. But if you would, each of you 5 minutes, and we'll begin with Representative Miguez.
Thank you so much. So where do we go from here? We'll likely be in a October session. That's what our 2 leaders, our House Speaker and our President of the Senate, are talking about. We're waiting to see what the federal government's going to do. You know, they're working on potentially negotiating I believe it's called the HEALS Act, which is going to bring more federal money down. It's going to address things like the PPP program, unemployment pandemic payments, also deal with money to go to schools, possibly money for our postal service. A number of things are being discussed by Republicans and Democrats in Washington right now. That's going to sort of set the tone to what our October session may be. We have some issues in our October session that we have to dealing with our unemployment trust fund. That's going to be a huge issue. The trust fund, we're putting out around $58 million per week is what we're paying in unemployment out of our trust fund, which had billions of dollars in it, which is running out of funds, and it probably only has a few more weeks left of funding in it. And there's some scary things what happens automatically by a law, where it goes on the backs of businesses if nothing happens. So the legislature's got to look towards solutions to make sure that businesses don't get a welcoming surprise tax on their back. You brought up the constitutional amendments that are coming up this fall. I'm so glad you brought that up because I don't want to leave that out of this conversation. One that's very, very important to all those pro-lifers out there, including myself, is the piece of legislation that we passed 2 years ago that basically says, it declares that no provision of the state constitution protects a right of abortion or requires the funding of an abortion. So we can actually take a step in the right direction for pro-lifers out there and protect those unborn babies by supporting this constitutional amendment that's going to be on the ballot. Another constitutional amendment, I co-authored the bill. Boboye and I worked on it. He was a primary author. I'm very proud of his work on this legislation. Deals with the expenditure limit. We always talk about government growing too fast, and there's always an argument about how fast should you grow government versus the private sector. And you know, members on both sides of the aisles have their own opinions. Well, Bo and I got together and worked, as well as some of the other legislators, and again, he did a great job offering this bill on the House floor. He negotiated with both sides. At the end of the day, he got a product that we really need to support when we go through the polls as a constitutional amendment. What his bill does is it basically says, in this constitutional amendment, it's going to limit state spending where it can't grow more than 5% per year without a 2/3 vote of the legislature. But the amount at which it grows is based on private sector indicators like consumer price and index, income growth, our GDP, a number of things. So basically what Bo said, and then myself as a co-author and a number of other legislators, is that we're going to allow the state government to grow as fast as the private sector. So if you're able to get the private sector to be very prosperous and do well, the state government can grow. But at those times like now, when the private sector is struggling and they're having trouble making their ends meet, the state government's going to have to live within their means too. So it allows government to grow as fast as it wants to grow, but it has to make sure that the private sector shares in that benefit. And in the past, we've seen where government grows, state government employees get pay raises while our private sector suffers. We pay more taxes and we lay people off, and it's just not fair. The private sector is the backbone of our economy. State government and federal government wouldn't have a dollar without the hard work that we do as taxpayers and business owners and employees. So it's only fair that we share in those successes. There's a number of other constitutional amendments on the ballot. One that Representative Marcus Bryant brought up earlier that we all supported deals with the budget stabilization fund, our savings account. And basically it's our rainy day fund, our savings account. And if you have a federal disaster, it allows us to use money in that savings account to get out of those situations. Look, think about your personal household. What's the purpose of having a savings account? Is when something unexpected comes up in your life, like an unexpected health bill or education expense, or something that breaks down on your vehicle or your home that you have to repair it. That's why you have it as a savings account. Well, what's more of a direct reason than a federal declared disaster? So that was a great piece of legislation that was worked on bipartisan. Keep in mind that the 3 constitutional amendments I just discussed out of the 7, I'll leave the rest for the other members to talk about, all supported with bipartisan, overwhelming support. It takes 2/3 of the legislature to pass these constitutional amendments. So you're going to get an opportunity to vote on this in the fall. The ones that I just mentioned, don't miss the opportunity to make our state a better place by protecting unborn babies' lives, by putting limits on how fast government can grow versus the private sector, and by giving us the ability to help the state when we have a federally declared disaster. Remember, there's more money that's going to be coming down from the federal government. We don't know exactly what it'll be yet, but you can count on one thing. This delegation, our senators and our representatives, will look out for the best interest of Iberia Parish. We're going to look out for the best interest of the state. We've been through very challenging times. We continue to go through challenging times. We understand the frustrations of all of our small business owners out there. We're going to work tirelessly every day to get you back on your feet. We're going to recover from this. We're going to have an economy again. We just all have to keep the faith. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity for re-electing me to be the state representative again for District 49 for the next 4 years. I'm honored to serve as your voice at the Capitol. I'm working hard every day to protect the constitutional rights, to grow our economy, to give opportunity for our future children. I'm watching my child grow up, as well as many of the other members in our delegation. And we want them to stay here in Louisiana, want them to work here in Louisiana, and most importantly, we would like to see them stay in Iberia Parish and make this a great parish like all you guys have. We want to see them serving and getting involved in the community. Again, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for the opportunity. My office is available anytime that anyone needs something. Just reach out and contact us. I'd be happy to help you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak today.
All right, thank you. You have an opportunity for closing comments.
Oh, that was our closing. Well, you got my closing there.
You closed a little early, but that's okay. Next we'll go with Representative Boboye.
Let's see. Okay, I'm off of mute. Wasn't sure yet. So yeah, one of the big things that I worked on during the session, Blake mentioned pretty good, which was that it's going to be number 4 from the constitutional amendment standpoint on the limiting the expenditure limit. One of the things that Blake did mention that you can kind of put into mind when describing to people, because we're going to need you all to be selling these amendments. We can only get out there so much to, you can speak to your employees, to your families, and really get the word out. But on the limiting, what this expenditure limit bill does is it brings some predictability for both sides of the aisle with regards to government spending. Right now, the current formula has a compounding growth effect on it, where the expenditure limit continues to grow and grow and grow, regardless of what our local economy does. So to give you an example, if the legislature hadn't reset the expenditure limit over the last 4 or 5 years, the state could have actually spent another $5 billion in state general fund dollars and then gone and tried to backfill it with taxes. Now, I don't think anybody believes that the state has another $5 billion laying around. So what this does is it keeps it in check, and it gives everyone some predictableness on how the state should grow. Based on the items that Blake mentioned in his discussion. So we're hoping to get some widespread support on it. We did work with both sides of the aisle to get this passed. It is not going to go in effect immediately because of COVID. So we agreed to delay the effect of it to get us out of this crisis that we're in. We did not want to put anybody in a pinch from that standpoint. But long-term wise, this is a great bill for the state. It's a different way of looking at the budget process, and it's going to bring more meaning towards the expenditure limit. Another item that's going to be on the ballot that you're going to see it's been heavily debated for decades is how to value oil and gas wells from a evaluation standpoint, from an ad valorem and from a tax standpoint. It used to be, if you have a well now, based on the equipment that's in the ground, and the expenses that it would incur to replace it, you're normally paying property taxes, ad valorem taxes on that equipment on base when it was like brand new, or when you would put it in brand new. So the oil and gas industry got together with the tax assessors and came up with an agreement where they're going to use the fair market value of these wells for assessing ad valorem taxes. So in the early stages of a well's life, when it's high producing and it's bringing a lot of revenue, they're going to pay more property taxes on it. As that well is depleted, the taxes are going to go down. So some of these stripper wells and that aren't producing as much are not going to be taxed at the same rate as something that's robust and brand new. So we hope that we can get everybody to support that as well. That's big for our oil and gas industry. Also, a couple other things that we're looking at, and you talked about in the future. The speaker has appointed me to sit on a task force to look at centralized sales tax collections. Right now, the state is losing money from the internet sales, but also just from the expenses of not having stuff centralized. So we're looking at the best process, and we're getting all the stakeholders in place, and we're having meetings at the Capitol. I have another meeting next week. We've had a couple of them, but we have the school boards there, the tax assessors there, the sheriffs there. We're looking to find a process that works for the state. Blake also mentioned the unemployment trust fund. This is something that I've been sounding alarm on since back in May. I testified before the Labor Committee and explained to them the concerns that I had with the unemployment trust fund. Back then, we had $855 million in our trust fund. As of last week, it's down to $235 million. Last week, Secretary Ava Dejois with the Workforce Commission went ahead and put in a request to the federal government to borrow money to create a bridge loan for our unemployment trust fund. And so at one point, they were talking about some mandatory taxes that had to be applied to pay back these loans. We've uncovered that there's some other opportunities. And so we're hoping that it doesn't end up on the backs of our business community. The other thing that I am meeting on tomorrow with the Secretary of State, with Kyle Ardwan, we have an emergency election plan that was unveiled yesterday. We're going to debate it heavily in committee tomorrow and ultimately vote on it. But the election plan is a little bit different from the one you saw in July and August. So my time is run out. So I just encourage you to pay attention to that. I think this election plan protects the integrity of our elections in Louisiana and also gives some relief for those people who are suffered from COVID so they can have some options as well. So stay tuned for that. But thank you all. And I think that does it.
All right, thank you very much. Next, Representative Bryant.
Let me say thank you for having me. And also thank you for everyone in Iberia Parish. Being a Berry boy, I've received a lot of support in a lot of things since being elected to the legislature. But not to go back through what Blake went through and Bo, they went through the amendments extensively. I believe that what we're gonna have to do locally is have what the chamber is having now, a lot of different meetings in our communities to help the people understand what the amendments mean. I think in past, due to the complex language that's put on the actual ballot and in the election booth, has taken away our ability to pass amendments, or taken away our ability for the people to understand exactly what they're voting for. So that's all I'll say on the amendment part. I'm not married to any particular amendment that we do have on the ballot this election season, but I am married to trying to work in my district to understand what local groups, what local chambers and other entities are gonna have meetings and community events that helps explain some, in a simpler language, what these amendments mean. As far as opening our economy, we now in our state have over 138,000 COVID cases. COVID is still very real in our state and is still on a widespread. We have 4,400 deaths due to COVID and over 100,000 people still, I believe, still recovering from COVID. So as of now, dealing with COVID and understanding what it's going to take to get rid of it or what it's going to take to minimize it and still have a functioning economy, is still our main goal. The citizens and the health and well-being of our children in our schools, in our communities is always going to be our main focus. So let's see, we still have 1,200 patients in the hospital. We still have 184 people, residents and citizens on ventilators. This is not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's 50-50 of race is being affected by COVID and dealing with fatalities in all ages and all age groups are being faced with deaths due to COVID. So at the same time, while we're protecting our small businesses, which is a big deal, I run a small business myself and understanding how to function and how to go about being prosperous during COVID, we also have to deal with the fact of the matter that we're dealing with a health crisis in our country and in our state, and our state is being heavily affected more than other states, and trying to figure out how to survive and thrive without putting our kids and our families at risk. So that's a closing, I believe, or the gist to that. I won't go through the amendments again. Blake and Bo comprehensively explained the different amendments on the ballot.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Mills, how do we make our budget sustainable? And can you talk about the amendments?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Well, first of all, from a budget standpoint, at the bank the other day, I had a regulator come in and say, how does your loan portfolio look like right now? And I said, well, let's get a Ouija board and we'll try and figure it out. I think right now, between PPP money, between unemployment money, between stimulus money, and between the four CARES acts that came in, we've got probably in excess of $10 billion that hit the economy, our state budgets, our local budgets in Louisiana. So as my predecessors talked about earlier, they talked about this issue for years and years. And for right now, our current legislative delegation's talking about it. The budget right now is probably the biggest unknown that we know of what's going to be in the future, because it has been propped up so much by federal and state money, and also by certain guaranteed loan programs. What I think for myself, what I'm going to concentrate more on is more of the details of the budget. And from my standpoint, in 2017, the healthcare budget was about $11.7 billion. Right now, it's grown to $17.6 billion. Now, of that, about $15 billion is federal money. And who knows what's going to be the outlook of the way the feds are going to be able to fund healthcare in Louisiana. I think this next election is going to be critical for either side to know what's going to be the game rules come January of next year, because I think both parties have different thoughts on funding healthcare, and we'll be having to pay a close attention to that. A big issue, I think, that we need to pay a lot more attention. I've harped on this for years and years, and it's something that I just follow. Anytime legislation is contemplated, the Legislative Fiscal Office develops what's called a fiscal note. And it's a prediction of what this legislation, if passed, is going to either cost the state of Louisiana, save the state of Louisiana money, or maybe invest in certain types of businesses or programs that's going to bring a return on investment. What I continue to talk about is I don't think we do a good job once those fiscal notes are looked at, to look at those fiscal notes in the next 4 or 5 years to see if the prediction came true. If we came up with a program and we said it would cost $2 million, from the audits, what is the program costing us 5 years later? As business owners, and so many people on this Zoom call, once you make a loan with your bank, 4 or 5 years later, you have to go back to your bank and say, hey, my predictions were accurate, and now I'd like to renegotiate the terms and conditions of my loan. I'll be, for the next 3.5 years, really concentrating on the fiscal notes. One of the big sustainable parts of the budget that I feel have to be looked at, and it's going to be coming out, is managed care organizations manage the Medicaid program. It's probably a $13 billion contract, I'm guessing, somewhere around that. RFPs will be coming out. I'm not sure when, but when they do come out, I think we all have to take a role in these contracts to make sure that those contracts best suit the taxpayers of Louisiana. And if there's certain demands that aren't met within those contracts, there needs to be some ratcheted back provisions in that. So I think we need to take a much harder look at contracts that we negotiate to make sure they're more one-sided to Louisiana. I think that's number one. Number two is we have to take a deeper look at the fiscal notes that are developed when legislation comes out. And the other thing that I think there's really money that we can save within our budget to be more efficient is in all aspects of the agency, and so many of our legislative delegation sits on different committees, we will continue to look at audit reports. Just yesterday, I had an audit advisory council meeting, and we discovered from an outside audit by the Legislative Auditor's Office, there's an investigation taking place with the legislative auditors right now that one medical provider we think committed $8 million of Medicaid fraud. We need to get those type of programs back in line. We'll continue to work on that, and that's something we'll go from there. From the constitutional amendments, I looked at the notes, and we talked about 5 of the 7. 2 we didn't talk about, and 1 was concerning unclaimed property, and unclaimed property is money that's in the coffers of the Department of Treasury. And I want to say the House and the Senate did an excellent job of crafting a reserve that we need to keep intact. So that's a good constitutional amendment. And the other issue concerns ad valorem taxes, and it raises the threshold from $50,000 to $100,000 on special assessment of people's income. But one thing I don't think we talked about that I think will be of interest to people, and I know my time is up, but I'll make this really, really short. There's going to be a proposition on the ballot of Senate Bill 130 by Senator Cameron Henry, and each parish will be able to determine if they would like sports wagering in their parish. So it'll be parish by parish, but that's another proposition separate and apart from the 7 constitutional amendments.
Okay, thank you, Senator Mills, and we want to thank all of you for appearing today and helping inform the community and our chamber members. I'd now like to turn to our chamber director, Janet Gonzalez, for a few closing comments.
Well, again, I would like to thank the panelists for being with us today. Always such a sharp group and continuing to be so. So thank you all for being here and engaging with us, and for having patience through our technical difficulties. Things seem to level out there towards the end. So we're learning every minute. Also want to again acknowledge Cane River Pecan Company for sponsoring this event, and for JD. If you haven't stopped into the retail shop on Main Street, there's a lot of great gifts to pick up there as souvenirs for your visitors, as well as, of course, wonderful pecan options. So thank you, JD. We always appreciate you. We're thrilled about the outcome of our chamber board's recruitment efforts this year. We underwent a campaign to recruit more micro businesses. Seems that most people think the chamber is for big business, and it is, but it's also for our smallest business. So those who had not had a chance to join us before, we did some outreach and actually added 20 businesses that have 5 or fewer employees and are just really happy to have those. They add a special voice to the work that the chamber's doing, and I wanted to applaud our board for taking on that effort and encourage everybody to shop local and support these local families and get great local products too. Our next ribbon cutting is August 27th for Partners Paint and Body Shop. They're located at 1312 West Admiral Doyle, and we're currently doing on-site ribbon cuttings, and we're asking everyone to wear a mask, and we're also hosting them on Facebook Live so the businesses get even more visibility, and they're just wonderful celebrations of courageous efforts of people opening businesses in the community these days. Our next session will be on September 1st at 8 a.m. and Senator Kennedy will join us for that and will be the featured speaker for that event. And to Representative Bryant's comments about the constitutional amendments, we do plan to have a roundtable type Zoom meeting on that, probably on October 20th, so we can make sure that everybody understands what the amendments mean. And again, we'll post those to our YouTube channel just like we will today's events. So, political forums are set now, and that is for the local races that are on the November 3rd ballot, and they will be held on September 22nd and 23rd. And of course, right now we're assuming that that's going to be a Zoom situation as well. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support of the Chamber and for the Iberia Parish community. And that's a wrap.
All right, thank you, Janet. We want to again thank JD Regard and Cane River Pecan Company for sponsoring this event. As Janet said, the retail shop is on Main Street. They have some great products. We want to thank everyone for attending, and you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.